somewhere on your family tree, thousands of years ago, one single human being changed their eye color by accident. And if you have blue eyes right now, watching this video, scientists say you're almost certainly descended from that exact same person. Not someone like them, not a similar person from a similar tribe. The same individual. One person, one moment, one genetic accident that every single blue-eyed human on Earth today can trace back to. And the strangest part isn't even that claim. The strangest part is what scientists found when they looked at the skeletons of the very first blue-eyed people ever discovered, because their skin didn't match their eyes at all. But we'll get to that. Before we go further, if stories like this, the kind that make you question something you assumed was just random, are your thing, hit subscribe now. Because this channel is built entirely around moments like the one you're about to hear. Here's where it starts. Roughly 10,000 years ago, maybe as recently as 6,000, every human being on the planet had brown eyes. Not most humans, not the majority, all of them. Brown eyes are the default setting for the human species because they come from a fully active version of a gene that floods the iris with melanin, the same pigment that colors skin and hair, high melanin, dark iris. That was the human baseline for over 100,000 years of our species existing. So if brown was universal, where did blue come from? For decades, scientists assumed eye color was just ordinary genetic variation, the same kind of shuffling that gives people different heights or hair textures. Small mutations here and there, spread out across different populations, popping up independently in different places at different times. That was the assumption. Almost nobody thought to question it. Then in 2008, a team of researchers, led by geneticist Hans Eyberg at the University of Copenhagen, decided to actually test that assumption. And what they found didn't just surprise them, it overturned everything people thought they understood about where blue eyes came from. Eyberg's team studied a gene called OCA2, sitting on chromosome 15. OCA2 is essentially the gene responsible for producing melanin in the iris. But right next to it, they found something unexpected. A neighboring gene called HERC2 that acts like a switch, controlling how much OCA2 actually gets turned on. In people with brown eyes, how that switch stays on, melanin production runs at full strength and the iris turns dark. But in some people, researchers found a tiny mutation inside that switch, and it was quietly turning the melanin production down, way down, almost to zero. Here's where it gets strange. When they sequenced the DNA of blue-eyed individuals from Denmark, from Turkey, and from Jordan, 3 countries thousands of miles apart with completely different populations, they expected to find different mutations, different roads leading to the same destination. Instead, they found the exact same mutation. Letter for letter, identical. Which meant one thing. This wasn't multiple people independently developing blue eyes in different corners of the world. This was one mutation, appearing once in one person at one moment in human history, and then spreading outward through that person's descendants until it reached every blue-eyed human alive today. Think about what that actually means. If you have blue eyes, you're not just distantly related to other blue-eyed people. You share a single, identifiable ancestor with every one of them, not symbolically, genetically, traceably. The math behind that alone should stop you for a second, but it gets even more unsettling once you ask where this person actually lived. Researchers point to the region near the Black Sea, in what is now roughly the border area between Europe and Asia, sometime between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. That time frame lines up with a massive turning point in human history, the spread of early agriculture out of the Fertile Crescent, as farming communities began replacing the hunter-gatherer lifestyle that had defined humanity for tens of thousands of years, which raises an obvious question. Did this mutation spread because of farming? Did agriculture, migration, and new communities forming and merging give this single genetic accident the perfect opportunity to travel across an entire continent? Nobody can say for certain. But before we even get to that theory, something else happened that scientists genuinely did not expect. And it came not from a lab, but from a cave in northern Spain. In 2006, archaeologists working in a cave system called Braña in the mountains of Leon, Spain, uncovered the remains of 2 men who had died around 7,000 years ago. These were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, living just before agriculture reached that part of Europe. Their bones were remarkably well preserved, well enough that in 2014, A team of researchers managed to extract and sequence usable ancient DNA from one of the skeletons, known as Braña 1. What they found broke the pattern almost everyone assumed was true. The 7,000-year-old hunter-gatherer had the genetic markers for blue eyes. That part fit. Blue eyes existed in Mesolithic Europe, just as the timeline predicted. But his skin? His DNA showed genetic markers for dark skin far darker than almost any modern European. Dark skin, blue eyes, together in the same person, thousands of years before Europeans, as we picture them today, ever existed. That combination seemed almost impossible at first. We're conditioned to associate blue eyes with fair skin, light hair, the classic image of Northern Europe. But Braña 1 shattered that assumption completely. And then, just a few years later, an even more famous skeleton would confirm it wasn't a fluke. In 2018, researchers at London's Natural History Museum published DNA results from a nearly complete 10,000-year-old skeleton known as Cheddar Man, discovered back in 1903 in Gough's Cave in Somerset, England. For over a century, people had imagined Cheddar Man the way they imagined every ancient Briton. Pale skin, light features, essentially a prehistoric version of a modern Englishman. The DNA said otherwise. Cheddar Man had dark to black skin and blue eyes. One of Britain's oldest known ancestors and arguably the closest thing to a genetic snapshot of what early post-Ice Age Europeans actually looked like, had a skin tone that would be considered dark by modern standards, paired with the pale blue eyes we now associate almost exclusively with fair-skinned populations. The genes for light skin hadn't spread through Europe yet. They would arrive later, carried in by other migrations. But blue eyes were already there, thousands of years earlier than lighter skin, which means the popular image of the blue-eyed, pale-skinned European ancestor has the order backwards. Blue eyes came first, light skin came later, and from a different genetic source entirely. Almost nobody knows that. And once researchers accepted that these two traits evolved on separate tracks at separate times, it forced them to rethink the entire timeline of how modern Europeans came to look the way they do. But there was still one problem nobody could fully explain. If this was really one mutation from one ancestor, why would it spread so far, so successfully, in such a relatively short window of time? Genetic mutations happen constantly. Most of them vanish within a few generations, drowned out by the overwhelming majority of the population that doesn't carry them. For a single mutation to spread from one person to hundreds of millions of people across multiple continents, something has to be pushing it forward. This is where the theories start, and where scientists genuinely disagree. One leading idea is sexual selection. The possibility that novel, unusual eye colors were simply found attractive, giving people with the mutation a reproductive advantage purely because they stood out. It sounds almost too simple, but sexual selection has shaped traits across the animal kingdom for reasons that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with mate choice. Under this theory, blue eyes didn't spread because they were useful. They spread because they were noticed. Other researchers push back on that, pointing out there's no solid evidence. Blue eyes were considered more attractive during the Mesolithic or Neolithic periods. We simply don't have the kind of cultural record from 10,000 years ago to know what people found appealing. Instead, some scientists argue for something less romantic: genetic drift, migration, and the simple fact that small founding populations moving into new, isolated territories can carry a rare trait to unusually high frequency purely by chance, especially when that population later expands rapidly. Farming communities didn't just spread outward. They also tended to boom in size once agriculture provided a stable food surplus, meaning a mutation present in an early farming population could be carried along for the ride, multiplying with the community itself. There's also a third, quieter theory that involves vitamin D, as early humans migrated north into regions with far less sunlight. Than Africa or the Middle East, natural selection favored traits that allowed more light to reach the skin, since sunlight triggers vitamin D production, and vitamin D deficiency causes serious health problems. Lighter skin was one adaptation to low sunlight. Some researchers have speculated that changes to iris pigmentation might be loosely connected to this broader northern adaptation, though this remains far less established than the vitamin D and skin pigmentation link, and most experts are cautious about drawing a direct line between eye color and sunlight the way they do with skin. So which theory is correct? Historians and geneticists still don't agree, and that disagreement itself tells you something important. This isn't settled science with a tidy answer. It's an active, ongoing puzzle, and the honest scientific position is that sexual selection, genetic drift, and migration patterns may have all played overlapping roles rather than any single explanation fully accounting for it. What almost nobody expects, though, is what happened once researchers started digging deeper into the genetics of eye color as a whole, because the original 2008 study made it sound almost like a light switch, one mutation, on or off, blue or brown. But later research complicated that picture considerably. Scientists have since identified that eye color isn't governed by a single gene at all. It involves multiple genes interacting together, including additional regions near OCA2 and HERC2, which explains why eye color exists on such a wide spectrum, not just brown and blue, but green, hazel, amber, and every shade in between. The original mutation appears to be the primary reason blue eyes exist at all, essentially the foundational switch that made low melanin irises possible in the first place. But the exact shade any individual ends up with depends on a more complex genetic conversation happening around that switch. This means the story isn't as simple as one gene, one ancestor, one perfect answer. It's closer to this. One ancestor's mutation opened the door, and everything that followed, the range of blues, the greens, the hazels, is the result of thousands of years of that original variant mixing with other genetic factors across different populations. And that brings us back to the question we opened with. If you have blue eyes, does that really mean you're related to every other blue-eyed person on the planet? Based on the genetic evidence, the answer researchers landed on is genuinely yes. Not metaphorically, but through an identifiable, traceable, shared variant, inherited from a single common source thousands of years in the past. Somewhere back through your ancestry, through migrations, invasions, marriages, and journeys across entire continents that no single person alive could ever fully map, that one mutation survived, got passed down, and eventually reached you. Think about everything that had to happen for that to occur. That person had to survive. Their child had to survive. Across roughly 300 to 400 generations, war, famine, disease, migration, and sheer chance had to let that one genetic thread continue, unbroken, all the way to this exact moment, to this exact video, to whoever is watching this with blue eyes right now. And here's the detail that makes it even stranger. This isn't ancient history in the way the pyramids or the Roman Empire are ancient history, massive civilizations, built by millions of people, documented in stone and text. This is the opposite. This is one person, no name, no record, no grave anyone has ever identified as theirs. We will never know what they looked like beyond the mutation itself, never know their name, their language, or their story. And yet, in a strange way, they are one of the most successful human beings who ever lived, because a piece of them is still walking around today in the eyes of an estimated hundreds of millions of people across the planet. That's the real twist buried underneath all the genetics. We spend so much time thinking about history in terms of empires and wars and famous names carved into monuments. But some of the most far-reaching legacies in human history weren't built by kings or armies at all. They came from a single, nameless, undocumented person, alive somewhere near the Black Sea 10,000 years ago, who experienced a tiny error in their own DNA and passed a piece of themselves forward through every single generation since, all the way to a mirror you looked into this morning. If that changed the way you think about something as simple as eye color, imagine what else in your own biology has a hidden story like this one. That's exactly the kind of thing this channel digs into, so if you want more of these deep, evidence-based dives into the science hiding inside everyday things, subscribe now, because this is only the beginning.